Pedro's Journal, December 3rd. We are anchored in a quiet harbor in scattered showers. It has been raining for days without the slightest breeze or gust. Many of the men went ashore to wash their clothes and themselves in the river. 2 men wandered into the jungle and returned to tell us they had come upon a village where hanging from a post was a basket with a man's head in it. I don't think I will go looking in any baskets I find. One day, I went ashore with Diego, Columbus, and a native who was working as an interpreter for us. The captain gave Diego a bag of brass rings, glass beads, and bells, and told him to see what trading he could do. Diego agreed, but I could tell he does not like to do this. A group of natives joined us, but these were not so friendly, and they had little to trade. Their eyes were distrustful, and their bodies were painted red, with bundles of feathers and darts hanging from them. When we finished our meager trade, they gathered at the stern of our small boat in the river, and one began making a speech we could not understand. The others began to shout in response. Columbus stood by, looking pompous and arrogant as he waited, but the interpreter with us turned pale and began to shake. He told the captain to go back to the Santa Maria at once, that they were planning to kill us. I hopped right in the boat to go back, but Diego didn't move, and Columbus laughed. He interrupted the village speechmaker and drew his sword from his scabbard. With a gentle smile on his face, he showed him the steel glistening in the sun, sliced clear through a leather strap the speechmaker bore around his neck, and the man's beads tumbled into the sand. Next, the captain had one of his men demonstrate his crossbow. At this, the crowd of natives turned and ran into the trees. Our interpreter was still not comforted. He jumped into the boat beside me and, trembling, beckoned us to get aboard and get back to the ship quickly. The captain was slow about it. He talked of how he admired the workmanship of these natives, but how cowardly they were. They are so timid, 10 of our men could frighten away thousands of them. I said nothing. The captain expects nothing of me. I just watched silent Diego's back, straining and bulging in rhythm as he helped row us back to the Santa Maria. December 13th. It is difficult to keep a journal now that we are so busy traveling from island to island and up and down rivers in and out of harbors. There were no longer endless empty jaunts into the western sky. But one thing has not changed. The crew continues to grumble. They are saying this is not Asia at all, that this whole trip has been a costly failure. They say they will be laughed at when we finally return home. There are no silks, no treasures, and just tiny trinkets of gold. All we will bring back are spools of rough cotton thread, a few rustic spears, and some natives who grow quieter and thinner with each day they spend on board the Santa Maria. Columbus goes on naming everything he touches. He sees a cape of land and he says, I christen you Cabo de la Estrella, or Hail Cabo del Elefante. I name you Cabo de Sinquin, or Isla de la Tortuga, and I name you Puerto de San Nicolas. I am surprised he doesn't name the birds as they fly by. Every time his feet touch land, he thrusts a cross into the sand and claims it for the King and Queen of Spain. The natives no longer greet us with gifts and song. Now, when they see us, they run. I'm glad for this. Except yesterday, 3 sailors ran after them and brought back to the ship a most beautiful young girl. Columbus wanted to talk to her and convince her that we are harmless and wish only to trade. There seemed to be an instant tenderness between her and the other native women on board, whom I've written of before. She wanted to take the women with her when she left. Columbus refused, of course, telling her to go back to her people and tell them he means no harm. The women touched hands and spoke to each other in quiet whispers. When she was gone, the captain turned to me and said, Did you see the gold ring in her nose? The next day he sent a party to search for her in her village, and they found the village, but it had been abandoned. The fires were still warm, but not a soul was tending them. Soon they found people hiding and persuaded them to come out. They reported they even saw the beautiful girl on the shoulders of her husband, but when they returned to the ship, they did not bring gold or silks. More blessed parrots. December 16th. 2 nights ago, we left a bay where we had been anchored. We were trying to catch the light breeze that had come up when in the moonlight we came upon a lone man in a small canoe paddling frantically in the rough water. Columbus ordered him taken aboard, and once he was with us, breathless and uncertain, he was showered with gifts. The captain couldn't give him enough beads and bells and rings, and the man grew very happy and grateful. Columbus offered to take him to his home in our ship, which we did. The next morning we drew close to the shore and let the canoe down into the water, and the man paddled away. It wasn't long before a crowd of natives had gathered on the beach. There were hundreds of them, and they slowly paddled out to our ship, and some were taken aboard. These people were different from others we have met. They were fair, with skin as light as my own, and they brought nothing with them to trade. But when one of the crew would reach out and touch a bracelet or earring, the wearer willingly slipped it off and gave it freely. It was clear they were a gentle people. They touched our heads with 2 hands and kept pointing back to the shore. There we could see a very young man arriving with much fanfare. He was clearly their king. He would not come out to us at first, but stood at the shore, his arms crossed over his chest and his 2 old advisors close to each ear. What a sight our ship must be to these people. The captain sent him a gift the queen had earmarked for royalty, and he sent the message, one he now believes himself, that we are from heaven and are searching for gold. Later, the young chief did come out, and Columbus treated him with great ceremony, giving him more gifts and then some food. I thought Diego would have to jump overboard to hide his laughter when the native chief took one taste of our Castilian food and then passed it on to his advisors. Before the chief left, he made it clear his island was ours, and we had only to ask to be given whatever we need. This was much like a farmer opening the gate to let in a plague of grasshoppers. We will make the island ours. We will take whatever we need. December 25th. How will I ever tell my mother this? Her son has shamed her worse than any naked native or gold-greedy sailor. My friends cannot meet my eye. Ruiz scowls whenever he sees me, and even Diego pats my shoulder in pity when he passes. I hide from the captain lest he order me tied and gagged and shot from the Nina's Lombard. There is nothing worse that I could possibly report. I am lucky to still have my journal. I am lucky to be alive. Last night, after midnight, all alone, and with my own 2 hands, I sank the Santa Maria. It was midnight, and I turned the sand glass and called out my midnight call. I doubted that anyone heard me, though, for the crew had had a Christmas Eve celebration at dinner. The captain had cracked a cask of wine, and spirits had been high. No one had slept for 2 nights due to the natives swarming all over the boat at unexpected hours, so the wine lulled everyone to an early sleep, even the helmsman. I stood by him a while, missing home, and thinking of the midnight mass that my mother would go to, wrapped in her shawls against the wind from the hills. I was hoping Senor Morales had come with his wagon again this year to take her. We were nearly 10 miles east of the coast of Punta Santa, and there was no wind at all, and the sea was like a bowl of water, silent and still. Across the calm waters and under the new moon sky, I could barely make out the mast and sails of the Nina. Ruiz was at the helm, yawning and nodding. Sancho lets me steer sometimes, I told him. He's not supposed to, Ruiz answered. But I'm very good. Need I say more? Before I knew it, Ruiz was curled at my feet, and my only concern was that the captain would hear him snoring. I held my course, my eyes always on the right star. I swear it is so. We barely moved through the light night puffs, but soon the Nina seemed to drift away, and I could no longer see her. I began to hear a gentle swish, but took no heed of it, being tired myself, and it was all lost in the squeaks and groans and rattles of the rigging. But soon there was no denying. The sound was louder, and I didn't know what to do. I was about to kick Ruiz when there was a horrible scraping and grinding, and the whole boat shuddered. I think the captain was at the helm only seconds after Ruiz bolted to life and took the tiller from my hands. Then there was no mistaking it. I was listening to the crash of the surf on a barrier reef, and then the sound of a coral reef punching holes in our hull. The Santa Maria was gone. December 27th. The captain says now that it was for the best, that it was a blessing from God disguised as a catastrophe. Still, I am no longer the favored ship's boy. I have no strong voice to sing the prayers or to call the watch. I can't bear the gazes of the captured natives, and this morning I chased and swatted at a big-mouthed parrot until I pushed him right over the edge of the ship and he flew to the mast. No one can reckon with me now. Diego tries to tell me I am forgiven, that all is forgiven, but I am furious that everyone was so quick to blame me when I did nothing wrong. I was the only one awake. I was loyal and hard-working. For this I was blamed and forced to carry everyone else's guilt for their own drunken sleep and their cowardice. Yes, their cowardice. The scene on the sinking ship was pathetic. When the captain came on deck, he immediately ordered an anchor to be taken to the small boat we tow astern, and the anchor to be carried far out and secured so we could pull ourselves away from the reef by pulling ourselves towards the anchor. The captain sent Juan de la Cosa into the boat with some men, but instead of taking the anchor out, they rowed for their own lives toward the Nina and left us to sink. Columbus went into a rage as they rowed away, and he ordered the Santa Maria's heavy mainmast to be cut down to lighten her. But with each order, with each shout, we could all feel the ship grinding herself onto the sharp and deadly coral below. Of course, the Nina would not take Juan de la Cosa and his men aboard, but sent them back with another small boat to help. Then we were taken, a group at a time, to the Nina, where we spent the night watching the Santa Maria impale herself on the reef, while the captain wept openly in front of his men. How grateful I am that at sunrise the native chief came aboard and, weeping himself at our dilemma, tried to comfort Columbus with gifts of gold, with promises of more gold, and with directions to the east, where gold can be found in abundance. Suddenly, upon hearing this, the captain was saying that the Santa Maria was too heavy and unsuitable anyway for the business of discovery, and her sinking became, in Columbus's own words, the predestined will of God and a stroke of luck. The only luck I can imagine for myself would be to wake up in my mother's house and hear her sweeping the hearth and to know this was all a terrible dream.